Your bookkeeper isn't telling you this, but I will. This one thing can put you out of business faster than anything else. It can bankrupt you, and you can literally lose everything. Bookkeepers, they're so caught up in the transactional and compliance side of the business that they miss the bigger picture. Now, I'm generalizing here. Bookkeepers are super valuable and they're really important to businesses. But think about it. There are so many transactions coming into your company, and you have to categorize them in the appropriate accounts, and that takes a lot of time. You also have to manage the GL, you have to reconcile accounts. Sometimes you're doing accounts receivable, accounts payable, you're cutting checks. You're doing all these duties, which are super important to the financial side of the business, but it doesn't leave them with a lot of time to step back and do financial planning and analysis. And what I'm talking about here is maintaining rolling financial forecast, tracking KPIs, tying those KPIs back to the strategy, telling people the story behind the numbers. All these things are very strategic to a business, and they have to connect to the strategy of the business. And bookkeepers, they just don't have the capacity or the resources necessary to do these functions, and then guess what? They just fall by the wayside.
How come they don't have access to that information?
I think it's just they're bombarded with trying to do a good job with categorizing everything and reconciling everything, and there's just not enough hours in the day. I remember as a CFO of a bigger company, I had 40 people in my department. In my accounting team, okay, and this isn't to like brag on them, but they were a great team. But they worked the most. They worked the most amount of hours. They were there the latest. They worked on weekends, and they were just bombarded with just all the compliance and all the transactional and all the things that go into a business. So oftentimes the problem is that leaders, they think, oh, I have a bookkeeper, I have a CPA, I have a controller, I'm good. I don't need anything else because I have the accounting side of my business handled, but they're missing out on the strategic side of the business. Right? The planning, the analysis, looking at KPIs, making database decisions, and therefore they leave so much money and so much profit on the table.
Well, obviously business owners aren't dumb. Why would they leave money on the table?
I think that's a good question. I don't think business owners are dumb either. I just believe that business owners are so caught up in putting out fires and managing their team and handling customers and working on sales so they can keep the entire engine working in their business. And it's so easy to think, oh yeah, the accounting side of my business is working well, so just forget about it. Because think about it, for most businesses, it's about getting leads and it's about having good employees. And the financial side of the business just gets put on the back burner. But I don't know if you remember this, we were doing that financial analysis and we were doing this for a company and we identified a massive gap in their operations. They're losing $3.5 million in profit a year. $3.5 million. And I went to the owner and I said, look, here's the gap. And he's like, wow, that's crazy. And he knew that there was a gap. I just don't think he ever quantified it. So when it was in front of his face on a piece of paper, he saw, wow, $3.5 million, that's a lot of money. And so I thought, it's a no-brainer. He's gonna move forward, he's gonna fix his business, he's gonna adopt these very simple things to close the gap. And we're not even talking about operational excellence. We're just talking about bringing him to industry standard. And he said, yeah, let's just address this later on, maybe in the fall. And I was like, in the fall, after you submit all these bids, after you do all this work, you want to come back and address it in the fall? That's crazy. And I think that's the trap that business owners get into. They think that the accounting side, the financial side is working well because they have a budget, they may have some KPIs, or they don't have any of that stuff and they're like, we've been profitable in years past, why do we need it now? But I think if you lose sight of things like free cash flow or the other metrics that really move the needle in your business, you could be missing out on so much. And for this business, if they missed out on $3.5 million in profit, think about how much work they'd have to go out there and do to make up for that profit. And I think that's the trap that business owners fall into. And you may be falling into it as well. You're just going out there, you're getting work, you're doing work. getting work, doing work. And you're repeating the cycle over and over again instead of stepping back and thinking, what's broken and let's fix it. And therefore we could do less work and make the same amount of money or more money. And you don't have to have all the employees, all the trucks, all the equipment, all the headache, all the customers. You'd be making more money by doing less. Or you fix it and you scale your business and you could be making significantly more than you are now.
Do you think there's a difference between what bookkeepers actually do versus what owners think they do?
Yeah, I think for most owners, accounting and finance isn't their first passion. I love it. I love finance and accounting. I talk about it all the time. But I think for most business owners, it could be a little mysterious, right? And it could be a little intimidating, a little overwhelming. So they just think they got it. They have it handled. Let me ask you this. Have you ever heard of a story? Maybe you've heard somebody in your family or your friend group or just somewhere in your community where they trust an insurance agent and they think they have coverage on their home or on their car or health insurance, whatever it may be. And then disaster strikes. And then they realize, oh my gosh, we don't have coverage. And this one incident is going to bankrupt us. And it's all because they put all the trust in the insurance agent. And maybe the insurance agent wasn't doing anything malicious or they're acting out of negligence. Maybe they just misunderstood. So I think with business owners, if we bring it back to this example, they think everything's being handled in your business. And going back to that one thing that bankrupts companies, it's not growth. It's not a lack of growth. It's not profit. It's cash flow. 70% of companies that go bankrupt, they're profitable when they close their doors. They have profits. They just don't have cash flow because they're not managing working capital and capital expenditures. And more importantly, they don't have a strategy that makes financial sense. So I think that's the bigger problem there.
So if bookkeeping doesn't really equal clarity, what else do you need to get real visibility into your business then?
Yeah, I think it's the other tools that build upon bookkeeping. So you have to have solid bookkeeping. We've looked at books before and I'm like, why the heck are there no labor costs and cost of goods sold? Why is it all down in overhead? And it's just simply because you do payroll gets recorded to one account, it doesn't get allocated to your cost of goods sold, and therefore your gross margin's off. So really good bookkeeping sets this foundation to make decisions off of. And so you have to have the bookkeeping. And then from there, you can elevate it by having a forecast. And that forecast can look out 1 year, 2 years, 3 years into the future and help you to understand your cash flow. You could even have a 13-week cash flow, depending on your situation. If cash is always tight in your business, this 13-week cash flow will help you to make decisions week by week about payroll, about who to hire, who to lay off, or other business decisions that you need to make your company work. And so it's the forecasting, it's the KPIs, it's knowing what to track. You can't just ChatGPT, what KPIs should I be tracking? Nor can you build a KPI tracking tool in Excel. I mean, you can, but Excel is not a database. You can't share it, right? It gets sloppy, somebody fat fingers a formula and it blows up. So I think when it comes to bookkeeping, it's the foundation, but then you have to add in the planning, the analysis, and the strategy on top of it to make it all work.
So at what point do owners need to take responsibility for knowing their numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great because bookkeepers can't take all the blame. I've been a CFO before, and I've worked with CEOs, and they say to me, Steve, finance isn't my thing, just not good at numbers. And I'm like, hold on here. We're not going to play this game. I'm not trying to turn a CEO into a financial nerd, right? Where they're doing debits and credits and tick and tying their trial balance out. Instead, they need to have a basic understanding just for the fact that it's a CEO's fiduciary responsibility to protect the assets of the company. In other words, it's a CEO's responsibility to make sure the business stays in business. They need to understand what are the financial metrics they need to be paying attention to. Like I said, they don't need to be doing debits and credits or understand the IRS tax code. But they need to have a basic understanding because if the business fails because they run out of cash, a CEO can't go back and say, hey, it's the bookkeeper's fault. I think it's the CEO's fault because They should have been paying attention to the numbers. And look, if there's a gap between your bookkeeper and you, that's where you can get fractional support. That's what we do with companies all the time. We go in there and we provide that support. We give them the tools, we give them the visibility, so there are no excuses. So many small to mid-sized businesses, they don't have a CFO. And oftentimes they don't need a CFO, but they do need to have access to these tools. And look, if you are curious about how you're performing, maybe you have a CPA, maybe you have a bookkeeper already, maybe you even have a CFO, but you want to know how you compare financially to other businesses, or maybe you just want to know what is your business's financial health. We offer a free service where we will look at your financials, but you have to qualify. So if you go to the link down below, you look in the show notes, I have a link to this. You can go and apply, just fill out a simple form, give us a little bit of information about your company. And if you qualify, we will look at your financials. We'll look at your numbers from a CFO's perspective, and we'll provide recommendations. It's free, no obligation, and we do this because it's the starting point to a bigger journey. We want to help businesses improve their financial state, and this is the fastest way we can get in there, show you what the upside is, and build trust with you. So if this is of interest to you, click on the link down below, and that's my offer. All right, all this to say, make sure you have a strong bookkeeper in place. Make sure you understand the numbers, and you're gonna wanna make sure you have controls, because you don't want anything sketchy going on with anybody who's touching your books. And you always have to be careful, because I've run into a lot of business owners who have experienced theft in their company. And I'm not saying every bookkeeper is bad. You just want to have controls in place, because you never know. It could be your best employee in the world who's stealing from you. So it's the controls, it's the visibility, and it's the tools that will allow you to be very successful in business.